Let's talk about paleo. Hello, I'm Dr. Sam, this is Dr. Sam's Health, and today I'm continuing my quest on making videos at least once a week, and today I would like to talk about paleo. As you know, I've made a couple of videos about paleo diet, the origins of the diet, my thoughts on that, and I kind of promised that I will talk about the science that proves or disproves the effects of paleo diet on weight loss, weight maintenance, and obviously other health benefits that people who like the idea of paleo are promoting. So today I will discuss a couple of articles of interest, but prior to doing so I would like to make my regular disclaimers, which are, first of all, I'm a practicing physician, but I do not provide any kind of medical advice over internet, on YouTube, or on my website, drsamshealth.com. By the way, check it out. Also, everything I talk about is purely my opinion. My opinions are well-intended, usually well-researched, but at the same time, they do not necessarily represent the opinions or statements of my regulatory bodies, my colleges, my universities, and so on. Plus, the final disclaimer for this video would be that I'm kind of biased. I've already made a couple of videos about paleo. I do like the idea of this eating patterns that reflect or approximate the nutritional patterns of our ancestors, and I believe that's the way to go. But at the same time, I'm biased in the other way, meaning that I actually believe that in order to lose weight, you have to be in consistent caloric deficit, and it has little to do with the quality of the diet. But today we're gonna pull some articles and try to find the truth, if it is possible. As you know, I'm very interested in the effects of paleo diet and weight loss primarily, but also in some other health-related benefits of this dietary approach. I almost promised to do some sort of an extensive literature review on this subject, but quite frankly, I was very, very busy in the last months, if not years. And good thing is that I was quite lucky because there are much more robust researchers who actually dedicate their time to researching this subject, and there were quite a few interesting systematic reviews and meta-analysis published in this subject. One of them is called Cutting Through Paleo Hype. I won't talk about it today because today I would like to focus on weight loss. Initially, I've been looking for a meta-analysis that would combine the data from multiple clinical trials that would compare paleo diet to some other comparator diets and showing the data on weight loss that is achieved on either paleo or on these other diets. And I was lucky enough to find this meta-analysis. I'll show you this article. It was published in the Nutrition Journal in 2019. Very good research article. They have done a very thorough search. They have found 11 articles that would meet their criteria for inclusion into the meta-analysis. They have conducted a robust statistical analysis, and they came up with certain conclusions, but I realized that I don't want to talk about this meta-analysis today yet, for two reasons. Reason number one, I feel that I should make another video where I would talk about meta-analysis in general. A lot of people believe that meta-analysis is an ideal way of conducting research. I believe that it's a great way of conducting research, but the problem is that meta-analysis or meta-analysis usually come with certain shortcomings, drawbacks that might mask the actual result. And I think it deserves a special video that I'm going to make soon. But the second and the main reason why I would like to switch to something else is because when I started reading this meta-analysis and I looked into the tables that they have, it looked like one particular article out of this 11 had more than 50% of weight in the statistical analysis, which means that pretty much more than half of the evidence supporting or disproving certain ideas comes from one single publication, which is not a good sign for a meta-analysis quality, but they work with what they have. And I realized that the best way of approaching it would be just looking into this particular article, and that's what I'm gonna do today. This article was published in 2018 by Caroline Blomqvist and co-authors in the European Journal of Nutrition. It is the most influential article or research report that is included in the meta-analysis that I was referring to. By the way, the link to this article will be also added to the description for this video. And definitely I'll have to make a nice blog about that on my website, drsamshealth.com. Check it out there. But returning to this article, I started reading it, and there is something funny happening here too. This article is based on a relatively large research project when they have taken 70 postmenopausal women who would be obese or overweight. They have met certain inclusion and exclusion criteria, and they have randomized them into two groups. One group of women would be receiving or following Paleolithic diet, another group would be following control group, some sort of Nordic Nutritional Recommendations guidelines, and they would do actually a good job making sure that people actually follow the recommendations in both diets. And the whole project was 24 months long. So this nutritional intervention was actually a high quality one because it was very long. 2 years is a great time frame for a nutritional intervention. But here's the fun part. This article, being absolutely amazing, I actually truly enjoyed reading it, and being the source of 50+% of data for the meta-analysis that was recently published, is not talking about the 24 months period of the trial. It talks only about the first 6 months, because this article is focusing on health related markers, biochemical, physiological markers of certain changes in your physiology or biochemistry when you're going on paleo diet, whereas the actual longitudinal data are published in another article by the same group of authors, and I also have it here. Before I get to that, which will be the meat of today's video, I would like to say that it's actually kind of ridiculous. I started with meta-analysis, and it looks like more than 50% of the data in this meta-analysis comes from one specific article, and it already looks quite biased because this particular article doesn't even talk about weight loss as the primary outcome, and it only covers a very short period, 25% of the actual longitudinal trial. Luckily, we've got internet, we've got PubMed, and I was able to find the real research. So let's dig into this one today, and later on we'll talk about the meta-analysis, okay? So what we have here is a classical description of two-pronged clinical trial when they have one group of people absolutely comparable to another group of people because they were randomized in terms of their weight, their body fat percentage, their nutritional, the baseline nutritional approaches. And they take one group of people, put them on paleo diet, they take another group of people and put them on the diet that is based on Nordic nutritional guidelines. There are some good descriptions of the kind of design of the both arms of the trial in terms of the diet. Like the people on Paleolithic diet, they were provided with 30% of energy intake from protein, 40% from fat, and 30% from carbohydrates, so it's just reduction in terms of carbohydrate load. In my opinion, it's still a little bit too high, but these people know what they're doing, I trust them. This diet was based on lean meat, on fish, eggs, vegetables, fruit, berries, and nuts. The other arm of the trial was based on these Nordic nutritional guidelines, and people there had 15% of protein, so twice less of protein, 25 to 30% of fat, and 55 to 60% of carbohydrates, with emphasis on low-fat dairy products and high-fiber products. By the way, in the paleo diet, they didn't consume certain kinds of products like cereals, for example. If we compare the baseline parameters of the subject in both cohorts, we'll see that there is only negligible difference. There is no statistical difference in terms of age, body weight, BMI, their waist circumference, and so on. Obviously, because they were randomized, it totally makes sense. Obviously, it's very important in this kind of research, nutritional research, to take a look at the energy expenditure. And at baseline, there were some negligible differences between resting energy expenditure and daily energy expenditure and energy intake. They're negligible because, first of all, they were very small, these differences, and second thing, they usually in this kind of research, they factor them in during statistical analysis. What is important to mention is that according to the authors, it looks like people on paleo diet, they didn't follow the protein intake requirements really well. And another element of this study, when I'm looking at the changes in terms of energy intake, it looks like people on paleo diet had dropped like 400 kilocalories per day consistently, like 375 for the first 6 months, 400 kilocalories for the remainder of the time, whereas people on the Nordic Nutrition Recommendation diet, they dropped 350 kilocalories per day in the first 6 months, and then they reduced their caloric deficit to 251 kilocalories per day on average. Quite frankly, when looking at this data, I would hypothesize that both cohorts of subjects would likely lose similar amount of weight in the first 6 months, just because their caloric deficit was approximately the same for the first 6 months, and then the Nordic Nutritional Guidelines cohort would kind of lag behind, and people on paleo diet would lose more weight just because their caloric deficit was higher. Turned out that the results are slightly different. Turned out that at the 6-month point, the Paleolithic diet cohort did much better than the cohort that was following nutritional guidelines. They have lost 6.5 kilos versus 2.6 kilos in the nutritional guidelines group. So this is already a very interesting and good result. I would explain this difference, given that they had pretty much similar baseline parameters and similar caloric deficit, nominal caloric deficit, by the fact that Paleolithic cohort had more protein in their diet, 30% versus 15%, and as we know, consumption of protein is associated with higher thermic effect of food, so people who are consuming more protein had to spend more energy on processing this protein, and accordingly they were actually much more higher factual caloric deficit. That's my working hypothesis. What is even more interesting is what happened at the end of the study at 24-month time point. It looks like, first of all, the difference in terms of weight loss became statistically insignificant, which is not that important because it is actually clinically or factually quite significant or meaningful. But it looks like the people who followed nutritional guidelines, they have lost 2.9 kilos, which is just 0.3 kilos more than they have lost at the 6-month time point, so they kind of stalled. But the Paleolithic diet group did something funny. They have lost 4.6 kilos in total, which is significantly less than 6.5 that they have lost by the time of the end of 6 months. So it looks like instead of continuing to lose weight, they actually have reversed the course of their diet or weight loss trajectory, and they have regained some weight. So what are our takes from this trial? First of all, I believe it's a great thing that somebody has conducted this kind of study. It is a longitudinal 2-year-long, very, or at least relatively well-controlled clinical trial. They compared 2 diets, and they have achieved some results. People kept losing weight on both diets, or overall they have lost some weight. In my opinion, it's not a huge amount of weight lost. As you know, I've been doing quite a few experiments on myself and my friends and colleagues, and I know for sure that people can lose way more weight in much shorter periods of time. It looks like at the same time that Paleolithic diet has certain advantages, and at least at 6 months, in a relatively short to mid-term perspective, people tend to lose much more weight than just following the nutritional guidelines. And in my opinion, I would say just educated guess would be that it is due to the diet composition. Higher amount of protein in the diet leads to higher factual caloric deficit. It is a big question what happened in the next 18 months, because people on Paleolithic diet, they kind of reversed the course of their weight loss, likely due to non-adherence. That would be my hypothesis, but I guess I would have to do more digging and more research on that. Having said that, I think we finally found a very nice research study that was able to show us some actual real-life results. I think that there is much more to be said about the meta-analysis as a methodology, and about this particular meta-analysis that I have in my hands, because after starting to review the actual meta-analysis, seeing that over 50% of the evidence comes from one particular study, and that this study is not exactly the one that they should have picked, in my opinion, because they have one study that shows 6 months worth of results and another one that shows 2 years. And I think that the one that shows 2 years yields just way more information, way more data that should have been included into the meta-analysis. Obviously, there is a lot to cover in my next several videos. As promised, a methodology of meta-analysis to begin with, then followed by the review of this meta-analysis, which already seems to be a bit flawed, but still it's a valuable piece of research, totally worth talking about. And of course, I would like to talk about health benefits associated with paleo diet other than just weight loss, whether they are related to paleo diet or not, whether they exist or not. And having said that, I feel that we have discussed a lot already today. I'm gonna wrap up this video. Please hit the like button if you liked it. Leave your comments, ask questions, hit the notification bell, subscribe. Obviously, check out my website, drsamshealth.com. I will definitely make a blog there dedicated to this subject, to the things I've been talking about today, and likely it will be much more detailed with some links for your information. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day, night, wherever you are. And I'll see you in my next video. All the very best.